It's Monday night in East Lansing. Jim Comparoni, publisher of SpartanMag.com. Welcome in. Hey, I need a thumbs up from somebody to let me know if the audio is okay. I had a little trouble with the audio button. Give me a thumbs up if you're in. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher of SpartanMag.com. Thanks, Rob South. Thanks for the notification. Hey, come on in. Pull up a beverage. I got mine. Let's talk some Michigan State football. Michigan State coming off a rough defeat down in Columbus against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State looked like one of those great Ohio State teams of the past in a lot of ways, but Michigan State slugged it out with them for a while, did some things on offense against a very, very good Ohio State defense, an Ohio State defense that had shut pretty much everybody down. Michigan State's offense under the microscope. How good are they? How bad are they? Michigan State scores only 10 points. That's still a problem, but they drove the ball enough to merit 14, 17, 21 points if they finish in the red zone, which continues to be a problem. But the offense, I know they ended up with, 270 yards or whatever, but they gained 318. I think it was 318. When you talk about how many yards you gained, then how many yards do you lose in sacks? Yeah, it costs you to lose the sacks, of course, but you have to gain yards too. You have to count those. The net yardage ends up looking not very good because Michigan State was so far behind they had to pass and accumulated a lot of sacks in the late going. But Michigan State moved the ball against a defense that's stacked with NFL talent. I had it written down somewhere, how many yards Michigan State actually gained. Not how many they netted, but how many they gained. There's a difference. Because you're watching that game and Michigan State's moving the ball, doing some things. Lewerke making some difficult passes into some tight areas. Eli Collins averages 5.2 yards per carry against a very good defense. And you're like, at least I'm thinking, man, they're moving the ball okay. They crossed the 50 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 times. And we've seen Michigan State get blown out before and not be able to budge on offense. This was not a case in which they were unable to budge on offense. They moved it, only scored 10 points, but they moved it. And I looked at the stats. I'm like, man, I thought that they played better than 280 yards or whatever it was. But then when you figure, like I said, yards gained, it was a little bit better. But in a situation like this, Michigan State's 4-2 coming off a blowout loss. A lot of what we want to do here at SpartanMag.com, today's podcast, we want to take questions from you, the Maggers. We've got some questions from SpartanMag.com. Those were posted over at the Underground Bunker message board at SpartanMag.com earlier today. Thanks to those of you who posted. I asked you guys post some questions. We will tackle them as we do here every Monday night at 8:30 p.m. And we'll get into those questions. Also, we'll get some questions from those of you watching live right now on our YouTube channel. Michigan State 4-2. First thing we want to do is survey the damage. We got some wreckage here. Let's survey what's left, what's good, what's bad, what's next. What are the chances of doing anything positive going forward for this Michigan State football team? I think a lot of you will agree there's a chance to still do a lot of things positive. The losses are starting to accumulate, though. It's hard to have a great season when you already have 2 losses before the halfway point of the season. Let's go right to the mailbag, take a couple questions, and appreciate those of you on the YouTube channel posting questions also. At some point, I will pause and tackle some of those questions as we go along. All right, the first question. We're going to skip down a little bit. We'll go out to Newport Beach, California. Silsby SH asks, do you see other options at cornerback if Josh Butler and Shaq Brown continue to be out? Kalen Gervin, he says, does not look ready for prime time, took bad angles, and does not look like a physically willing tackler. Thank you. That's what he says. Don't give up on Kalen Gervin. He's a redshirt freshman in there. Had his first start this week. Josh Butler unable to play. Well, he played on special teams, but missed some time due to injury. You may remember he did not finish the Indiana game due to injury. So Kalen Gervin got his first start, was ranked the number 1 player in Michigan coming out of Cass Tech High School 2 years ago, played a little bit last year, did not burn his red shirt. Gervin gets the start, and I agree, missed a tackle on that 60-yarder, which turned a 3-0 lead into a 10-0 lead for Ohio State. At that point, Ohio State had done very little on offense. Really hadn't done much on defense either. Michigan State had handed them the ball twice. Once. The other one, I'm not sure if it was a fumble or not. I never got a second look at it. The first one did not end up costing Michigan State points, but it did cost them some field position and some anxiety, which burns some of that, causes some mental fatigue a little bit. So Gervin missed that one. He missed a tackle on another play, one of the keepers by Fields. But Josh Butler played on special teams. last night on the teleconference. I'm still writing some stories about the teleconference, by the way. I would have done it today, but I spent some time watching some Wisconsin film. We'll get to that later, probably. Josh Butler, D'Antonio said, played on special teams. Maybe could have played more, but they went with Kalen Gervin, for better or worse. Certainly a learning experience for Kalen Gervin going against some NFL receivers. You're asking, Shaq Brown played against Tulsa, has not played since, and they could use that at corner because now you've got Shaq Brown and Butler out. Of course, Josiah Scott doing a good job at corner. Then you go to your number 4 corner, Kalen Gervin, to start against that offense, a dynamite offense. Kalen Gervin had some trouble. You're asking, are there any other options? Well, you're starting to run out of options really quickly at this point. You're getting to third-string players. And Michigan State did play a third-string corner, Dominique Long, for the last 2 plays of the first half. And Dominique Long's got some size, very good straight line speed. He's been a pretty good special teams player over the years, coverage guy. But in terms of hips and change of direction, hasn't always been his bag. Got on the field, and Ohio State immediately targeted him and completed a pass to Austin Mack, a back shoulder comeback. That was at the end of the first half when Ohio State drove for a field goal to go up 27-10. Back shoulder completion. He was a little bit awkward on that. Next play, they went to Austin Mack on a deep fade, press coverage, and Dominique Long in press, offhand jam, ran with them okay. Wasn't quite open, threw it kind of deep to maybe where Austin Mack would have a shot at it, but Dominique Long covered that pretty well. First time Dominique Long has had quality playing time in his entire career. Didn't look bad. And one of the cut lines for the article I wrote on Sunday morning, I mentioned that they tried to go into some depth to play Dominique Long, and it didn't look very good. Well, that's not entirely true. I thought he looked pretty good on that. Did not play in the second half. 2 snaps, Dominique Long. He's the option right now, but Josh Butler, I expect to be back this weekend. Shaq Brown, kind of a mystery. When there are injuries, they don't talk a whole lot about when people are going to be back. But it was my understanding, the indications that I was getting is that Shaq Brown was coming back at any time in week 3, week 4, week 5. Here we are heading into week 7, and he's still not back, and they could use him. Now, Trey Person last year played some corner. I think he started 4 games at corner. Did okay. He's done a pretty good job as a dime defense, nickel defense safety. Had a real big play in the red zone defensively against Indiana. Played in nickel in this game also. I've not seen any indications that Trey Person could go back and play some corner, but if things get dicey, he could do that. He played corner against Michigan last year. Remember the play that turned it around, the deep one to Donovan Peoples-Jones? That was against Trey Person. So you're talking about a guy that would be Michigan State's number 5 corner at this point, was involved in that play, which was a game-changing play. What was the score, 10-7 at that time? Maybe 14-10, 14-7, 14-7, I think it was, maybe. I don't know. Michigan State was kind of hanging in it with no offense. Gave up that one. I like Trey Person coming off the bench in the dime, by the way. Other people, Davion Williams is a guy that had 14 snaps on special teams against Ohio State, has been a regular in special teams. He's playing corner, waiting to see exactly what he's going to become. At some point, I would imagine he's going to be a player. He would be a guy to keep an eye on. But again, is he better than Kalen Gervin right now? Hard to say. Probably not, because Kalen Gervin got the start. Michael Dowell is playing more of an interior guy, maybe not an outside corner. So it's a short list, but right now I think Josh Butler will be back soon. I have no new information on Shaq Brown. Let's move right along to Lake Orion, Michigan. Sparty with a question. He says, any news on Jacob Panasiuk for the weekend? I wanted to tackle that question first because it is kind of a newsy situation. I've not heard anything about Jacob Panasiuk. Last night on the teleconference, Mark D'Antonio was asked about Panasiuk, and he said it's not a long-term season-ending type of thing. So that does not necessarily mean he'll be back for this game against Wisconsin. D'Antonio doesn't put numbers, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Once in a while, D'Antonio will do that, but he would rather not put that type of number on somebody. And if they don't have Jacob Panasiuk, that defensive line takes a hit. He's been a pretty good player. It looked to me that he hurt his back on one play, laying out to make a tackle in the red zone at one point, and then later on it was a lower body injury and he went out. Beasley came in, did pretty well. He started last year in emergency, I think, at Arizona State, and Beasley has continued to do better. Did you see that one play when Dobbins got out, turned the corner, and it was Beasley who had an angle, but chased Dobbins down and got the tackle on him? I'm like, Beasley, run in there, showing some speed. So Beasley's okay. But Jack Camper came in and played 2 or 3 snaps. There was one play, I think it was Ohio State's drive that made it 34-10. He was on the strong side, took on a tight end or an offensive tackle, and was squeezing the play and holding the point, setting the edge, and was about ready to disengage and make the tackle. He goes to disengage, and he got held. Dobbins turns the corner, gains about 15. They drive, score touchdown, and Camper didn't play anymore. And then he played at the very end. But, he came right out after that, and I was wondering, sometimes in the heat of battle, coaches don't see things exactly right. They might have thought that Camper was hooked on that play and didn't play his assignment well. But if you watch it again, he was held. No flag. But Camper, second straight game that he's come around and played a little bit, he's starting to gain some traction. If Panasiuk can't go, Camper's going to have to go. Now, Beasley will play, but they need Jacob Panasiuk, especially against these road graders of Wisconsin. Let me see if I've got the YouTube channel up just yet. Let me check. I'll go one more question here from the SpartanMag.com mailbag. Let's get this set up here. From Clausen. It's Bibbins. Now, I don't know if his name is Clausen Bibbins or if he's from Clausen and his name's Bibbins. Either way, he's asking if Michigan State loses 3 or 4 more games, would we, Michigan, meaning Michigan State, be locked into the Outback Bowl? Not 3 or 4 more games. He says 3 or 4 games total. That the bowl situation, I kind of gave up trying to figure that out 1 or 2 or 3 years ago when I bought some plane tickets to go here to Florida for one of those bowl games. Ended up going to San Diego. You're asking about the Outback Bowl. I don't know, but I don't know. Michigan State would be due to play in a Florida bowl game because the main thing with those bowls is they want to have a rotation of teams. So Michigan State won't be going to San Diego because they've already played there. They won't be going to San Francisco because they've already played there. I think Nashville is still in the Big Ten bowl rotation. You have to check that out. I think there's a chance for that. Michigan State was close to getting the Nashville Bowl last year, but there was word is there was someone on the selection committee in Nashville for the Music City Bowl. There was a big Purdue alum or donor or something like that. They really wanted Purdue. So Purdue was fed to Auburn in that bowl game. Didn't turn out very pretty. Michigan State played Oregon. You know what happened there. Low-scoring defensive game. Oregon looks pretty good this year. Michigan State, still remnants of a good team, trying to put more together. But I would think since Michigan State has not played in Florida in a while, Michigan State would be due to go back there. 4 losses, I think there's a chance. 3 losses for sure. If Michigan State ends up with 3 losses, that means they will have been hot in the second half of the season. That means they would have won 2 out of 3 against Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan. That's going to be hard to do. I think Michigan State can still be a good team. I thought they looked like a good team for portions of that Ohio State game. And you know that was close to being a close game. But football, the way it goes, it kind of came apart on them a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about those inches that got away. But Michigan State with 2 losses already, losing to Arizona State, who's a borderline top 20 team now, that scar won't go away. You have these other games coming up. Wisconsin looks better than we thought they would look in July. Penn State looks better than we thought they would look in July. Michigan looks worse than most people thought they would look in July. That's why it's amazing to talk about college football from April to July, all the talk shows, and I'm part of those talk shows, but man, we just talk about it. It becomes an echo chamber. We just repeat the same things over and over and over until we're all convinced that, Michigan is going to win the Big Ten. I mean, not everyone's convinced about that, but that's what we were talking about back then. And that Nebraska was going to win the Big Ten West. Wisconsin looks pretty good, right? I mean, it's fun to talk about this stuff, but so much, after 2 or 3 games, the stuff gets flushed. Remember when Syracuse was supposed to be good? Anyway, what was I talking about? Okay, so Michigan State, Michigan. This is what I'm looking at right now. You correct me if I'm wrong. In terms of surveying the damage and checking out the entire landscape, we all know that the Michigan State game is going to be a big pivotal game in terms of how the 2019 season is viewed for both teams. Michigan State, a couple of disappointing losses so far, but if they beat Michigan and split against Wisconsin and Penn State and end up 9-3, I think that'd be an outstanding season. I doubt that's going to happen. They'll probably lose one other one along the line. Penn State is better than I thought. That defense is good. Those defensive ends, Matos and the other guy, Tony. I was watching the Purdue game last night. He had 3 sacks. Tony, the defensive end, big time takeoff from the edge for Penn State on that guy. And number 54, the defensive tackle, looking tough. Their defense is good. Offense, third down offense, not good. I think they can fix that. The quarterback's a little better than I thought they'd be. Penn State's looking pretty good. Long story short, I mean, Michigan still has to play Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan State, Ohio State. I mean, if they don't get their crap together, they could lose 5 games. I think the winner of the Michigan State game, is going to go 8-4. That's what it looks like right now. I've been wrong before. I think the loser of the Michigan State game is going to go 7-5. And that would not be pretty for either side. So they won't be playing for the Big Ten East Division Championship, but it's kind of like one of those loser leave town matches. I don't think anyone's going to leave town, but it's going to be intense. Let's go to the YouTube questions. Rob South is here. Old Tuck is here. I had a question for Old Tuck. I was going to bring something. Oh, I've got an Old Tuck thing. If we talk about the Badgers, remind me about that. I think we'll talk about the Badgers a little bit. I might as well say it now because I'm going to forget. It's not that big a deal, but Old Tuck always says, hey, is somebody the Vincent Donaldson of now or the Brad Ranko of now? You know, he mentions players from the early 90s and so forth. I will say the middle linebacker for Wisconsin, I was watching them, seeing what they're doing on defense. They've shut out 3 opponents, and they do some really good things. But their middle linebacker, or redshirt senior, all their guys have redshirted. He's fast, commits fast, gets there quickly, contact guy, gets off blocks well. You know, when I talk about some of these players and I compare them to people, I try to compare them to someone that Michigan State fans, our readership, will be familiar with. So I'm thinking about Michigan State players they might compare to. And I'm thinking, who would Old Tuck compare this guy to? And I arrived at Reggie Garnett. I think the middle linebacker, or for Wisconsin, reminds me of a younger version of Garnett, maybe what Garnett was supposed to become. Garnett, by the time he was a senior, kind of lost some fizz there a little bit. But the middle linebacker, or quick, underrated player for an underrated defense. I guess they're not underrated anymore. Wisconsin's doing some great things statistically. Let's move on here. Rob South, can the fair weather fans please stop with the fire everyone and bench Lewerke? Is it just me, or are these fans crazy? It's getting worse. Rob South, I'm disappointed that you're having that type of experience down there in the South. I assume you're in the South. I don't know, but you're right. Yeah, read the cup. Rob South, lighten up, man. There's a lot of fans that are angry, hand-wringing and stuff like that, but they're fans, short for fanatics. It's going to be okay. As long as you're not a fanatic, just kind of deal with it. It's going to be all right. As far as firing people, I'm not hearing that. If they're saying that on the message board, I didn't notice it. Maybe they're saying it on Twitter. I don't read much Twitter. I read news on Twitter, but I don't read many opinions on Twitter or some of those threads. Talk shows, I don't know if anyone's saying that, or bench Lewerke. I don't think anyone with any sense, any brain is saying bench Lewerke. So if people don't have brains, I choose not to listen to those people. Now, in saying that, I'm hoping that doesn't cause a lot of people to turn this off right now, because you may be questioning whether or not I have brains. Through the remainder of this broadcast, I hope I'll demonstrate that I do have one. Let's see, Old Tuck out of Austin, Texas, via Ludington, Michigan. He says, talk more about running the hoop. Ankle and hip flexibility for defensive ends. What exactly does it mean, and why is it important and hard to find? Running the hoop, that's turning the corner. If you watched that Urban Meyer thing, the urban analysis on the Big Ten Network, was he going over Chase Young from Ohio State? He's talking about Chase Young. It's just, beating your offensive tackle is one thing, but you got to get to the quarterback here. Sometimes people get pushed past the quarterback. If you beat your offensive tackle and you run the hoop back to the quarterback, that closing speed, running the hoop, and if you go to practice a lot, they practice running the hoop, the defensive ends, for various things. Some guys can do it, some guys can't. And in order to do it, you have to have ankle flexibility, hip flexibility. So you're not stiff like this trying to turn the corner. You can actually flex your hip as you turn the corner. That's what hip flexibility is. I'd never heard that term before until I heard Todd Grantham talking about it way back when he coached for Saban at Michigan State. around 1998 when we were talking about defensive ends, and he says, we're looking for hip flexibility. I was like, what does that mean? And he explained to me what I just explained to you. Now Todd Grantham, he's been doing a great job as a coordinator at various stops. Now I think he's with the Florida Gators, and Florida has a great defense, great defensive line. They just shut down Auburn. They're undefeated. They'll be going to play LSU this weekend. So that's the hip flexibility. And someone else was talking about, I don't think it was Grantham that was talking about ankle flexibility, but there's times when you can see the ankle, and I don't see it live, but if I stop the tape with players or even recruits, I'll look to see if guys can turn the corner with their ankle. And I've seen some that could. Can't think of any right now. That surprised me in some ways. I'm trying to think if Chase Klein was in that category. But there have been a number of them. There's this guy in Indiana, like a big heavy, like an out-of-shape heavy guy that Michigan State was looking at. I think he ended up committing to Purdue, but I ended up having to go to JUCO or something like that. But he was kind of out of shape, sloppy, was ranked kind of high. Not real high. He was a 3-star. Michigan State could have had him. Michigan State doesn't like to get those sloppy, out-of-weight guys, overweight guys like Tyrone Sampson. Didn't end up biting on him. I can't remember what this guy's name was, but looking at his film, and he was just kind of hard to block in the T-shirt camps. And I looked, and he did have a good ankle flexibility. He's a defensive tackle, and I was always curious to see what would become of him because he did have those attributes, but needed to reshape himself. I don't know what happened to him, but sometimes I'll see it, but I've got to see it on film. Maybe other, coaches and scouts can probably see it naked eye. I cannot. I need to see it on film, but that's what that means. Let's move along here. Old Tuck, did Keaney Allen have flexible ankles? Keaney Allen from the early 90s. There's Old Tuck with a question from the early 90s. Keaney Allen. He did win the Doug Weaver Oil Can Award once. Keaney Allen was a defensive tackle, defensive end, and then they moved him to inside linebacker in 1994 when Michigan State went to a 3-4 defense for 1 year in George Perlis's final year as Spartan head coach because they brought in Henry Bulla to be defensive coordinator in 94. And George Perlis, who was always a 4-3 guy, decided to go with the 3-4, bringing in his old friend Henry Bulla to take over the defense, went 3-4. But he wanted to play the 3-4 because that's what Hank Bulla did, but Michigan State had more defensive linemen than linebackers, so they needed a second inside linebacker. They put Keaney Allen there, and he was okay. But I didn't know enough about it back then to look for flexible ankles, so I'm not sure about Keaney Allen. He had a pretty good start to his career, but kind of plateaued. Brian V. Need some SpartanMag live therapy. That's what we're here for, Brian V. Please tell us there's hope for these next couple of games. Yeah, there's hope. There's always hope. Always hope. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Wisconsin's good. Not great. They're good. They're pretty good. Really good. Do a few things really well. I was watching that Wisconsin-Northwestern game today. They weren't so great in that game. Total offense in that game. Wisconsin, 243 yards of total offense against Northwestern. You know what Northwestern is. We saw their defense when Michigan State played them. And Northwestern had some defensive linemen that are pretty solid and sturdy, number 90 and number 96. And, of course, the defensive end coming off the edge, 99, and whatever number Gaziano is, 75, I think. And Michigan State did a decent job double team moving some of those defensive linemen. I didn't think they would be able to do it against Northwestern. They did it a little bit, and I was like, hey, that's pretty good. Did a solid job moving those guys for Northwestern. I thought Northwestern's defensive linemen were pretty good. After that game, I wasn't so sure, because if Michigan State moved them a little bit, I'm like, well, maybe those Northwestern defensive linemen are not as good as I thought. Then I saw them against Wisconsin, and Wisconsin was having trouble moving those guys. And Wisconsin's strange with their blocking. They don't really like fire and drive you off. They just kind of like get into you, and Saban used to talk about this back in '99 when they had Dane. He said that, Saban with that West Virginia drawl, he says, Wisconsin just gets up into you and they just waller all over you. They just waller on you. They just stand up. They're like just big refrigerators, like polar bears. They're not trying to drive you backward, it didn't look like. They just waller into you. And then their tailbacks, they really teach you to have great patience and vision to accelerate through the gaps. If you've ever read some of the old Barry Alvarez coaching, not the clinics, but the coaching, the things that they used to write. Back before the internet, they would sell books on coaching, just coaching books. Each chapter from a different coach and so forth. And Alvarez used to talk about the importance of the vision when running the zone play and waiting and patience, then accelerate through the line. Well, the patience is while those big guys just kind of wallowing all over you, looking for the daylight. They don't run, Wisconsin does not run that outside stretch like they used to. When Alvarez first got it going with Brent Moss and Terrell Fletcher and those guys, man, they'd run that outside, that stretch play, turn it upfield. It seems like that should still work, but they don't do it anymore. Ohio State, a lot of teams run inside zone and outside. There's inside zone, outside zone, then there's that stretch play. Well, now this Wisconsin team, you know what they did against Michigan, but they couldn't move those guys for Northwestern. They're wallering, but those guys wouldn't move. And you know how good Northwestern's linebackers are. Patty Fisher and that other dude who led the Big Ten in tackles last year. The other guy led the Big Ten in tackles, not Fisher. They scraped over the top, made tackles. They got their safety involved tackles, got people on the ground. And you're wanting to know if there's hope. Michigan State, if they would have played Wisconsin last weekend, bushy-tailed and ready to go, playing good run defense like they did most of the game for most of the snaps against Ohio State, Michigan State can play that style. Wisconsin, they can stop Wisconsin. Last week they could have stopped. They had a better chance to stop Wisconsin. Ohio State cracked some plays. Tempo had something to do with it. I don't know. In some ways, I think Ohio State's harder to stop on the ground than Wisconsin is because of the mobile quarterback, or not just because of the mobile quarterback, and not just because Ohio State can throw it better. Even if Ohio State couldn't throw it better and didn't have the mobile quarterback, stopping Dobbins with Ohio State would be almost as hard as stopping Jonathan Taylor for Wisconsin. Then you throw in Fields and the throw game, and Ohio State, in my opinion, is a lot harder to stop than the Badgers. Now, well, I'm going to look for this question. I will piggyback. I'll skip ahead to Dr. Green and White because his question pertains to this. Dr. Green and White, a frequent poster on SpartanMag.com from Howell, Michigan, talking about the Badgers, says, is it fair to say that in this game it's critical to get an early lead so that Wisconsin is forced to pass? Critical, sure, that would help. You don't want to be playing from behind against anybody, obviously. But his point is, and he continues his question, how good is Wisconsin's passing offense? And how good is their defense? It seems to me that they have faced zero game pressure this year. That's right. Wisconsin has 3 shutouts in 5 games. They're the first team to do that in college football since Virginia Tech, I think in 2001. It's the first time Wisconsin has shut out three of the first 5 opponents since the 1930s. They shut out Central Michigan, Kent State, South Florida. Not really murderer's row, but, shutting people out is shutting people out. And Central Michigan's not bad. Central Michigan's 3-3. They just beat Eastern Michigan. And Central lost to Western Michigan, but Central's not bad. They gave Miami of Florida a tough game. All right, so, of course, Wisconsin beat Michigan 35-14. Could have been worse. Beat Northwestern 24-15. That one, as you may have seen, Wisconsin scored 24 points. 2 defensive touchdowns. Wisconsin that day against Northwestern scored 10 offensive points. Now they jumped out to 24-3 lead. Northwestern was battling with them through 2.5 quarters. Then the second defensive score just kind of made it 24-3 and floodgates a little bit. But then Wisconsin didn't finish them. Northwestern came back, scored, cut it 24-9, went for 2 stupidly. Didn't make it. Now it's 24-9. Scored again, 24-15, went for 2 again, didn't make it. So basically it's a 24-17 game. Just by offensive points, it's 17-14. Although Wisconsin didn't have to score at the end. Maybe they would have if they needed to. But how good is their passing game? Not very. Not very. This guy Cone, their quarterback, against Wisconsin, he was 15 out of 24 for 113 yards with 1 interception. He went deep once to 87. Cephas, the wide receiver who beat the sexual assault rap in August. It went to trial. Jury found him not guilty. He missed last year. Cephas, number 87 wide receiver, He was honorable mention All Big Ten in 2017, missed last year. This year he's got 17 receptions, 2 touchdowns, does Cephas. But Cone, from what I can tell, having trouble getting him to the ball, getting the ball to him. Cone will look around, he's not mobile, dumps it to the running backs a lot. The running backs have 24 catches. They've been trying to throw to Jonathan Taylor more. They'll throw to the fullback, they'll throw to the backup running back. A lot of times it's checkdowns, because I don't think he has confidence throwing it down the field a whole lot. In the past, Paul Christ's teams, whether he's the head coach or even when he was the coordinator, they've had some really good game-breaking tight ends, mismatched tight ends, like Lance Kendrick, some of those guys. Their tight end this year, Ferguson, 11 catches, 6'5", 246, sophomore, 11 catches. He's kind of a possession guy. He's kind of like one of Michigan State's guys, or less. They don't have that tight end like they've had in the past. They don't have a great this quarterback's not very good. A lot of people thought Graham Mertz, whatever his name was, true freshman quarterback, ranked one of the top pocket pass quarterback prospects in the country, coming in the highest ranked quarterback prospect probably Wisconsin's ever had. A lot of people thought he was going to be the guy this year, especially after what's-his-name transferred to Florida State, Hornibrook. But Mertz or whatever his name is, he didn't win the job. Cone won the job, and Cone's okay. But yeah, you definitely, if you can stop the run, make that guy beat you, yes. Northwestern contained the run. Taylor had like 115 yards or something like that. He's good. He's going to get loose for some. But there's no question. You contain the run, make that dude beat you, and Wisconsin can be beatable. On defense, won't be, of course, everybody's beatable, but the offense, I told you what they did against Northwestern. That can be done. That can be replicated. Some people would say Wisconsin had just blown Michigan out, and they might have had a little bit of a hangover. Of course, that's what everybody wants to believe in Ann Arbor. I heard a lot of snickering about that in the podcast last week. Wow, Wisconsin, man, they really had a hangover after they beat us. First of all, anyone that says us, fans can say it. But people in the media, if they didn't play, which I didn't, of course. I mean, look at me. Michigan shouldn't pat themselves on the back for Wisconsin having struggles against Northwestern. But they do. So that's fine, whatever. Defense. Now, their defense is, all these shutouts at Wisconsin. Last year, their defense, that's why I wasn't sure if Wisconsin would be that good this year, because their defense last year was not great. When they lost to Brigham Young, they were like beaten in the trenches. They were out-toughed by Brigham Young at Camp Randall Stadium. I mean, when Wisconsin needed to move the ball against BYU on the ground, they could not do it. And then when they needed to stop BYU to get the ball back, this is last year, when they needed to stop BYU ran the ball right at Wisconsin. Wisconsin could not stop them. And BYU scored, put it away, touchdown, scored, put it away, didn't get the ball back. I'm like, what the hell's up with Wisconsin? The year before that, when they had Vince Beagle and those guys, those guys kept getting hurt, and they kept reloading with these robots that came in, and they were good on defense with that 3-4 thing when Aranda was there. Was that the guy's name that went to LSU? Aranda, I think. Good defense. But then last year, they graduated some guys. Jim Leonard was in his second year as coordinator, and he was a real good heavy hitter in the late 90s for the Badgers, played in the NFL. But is he a good coordinator? I started to have my questions last year. Young guy. They struggled last year, and I wasn't sure. I was like, man, that defense that they've had for years, what they looked like against BYU, and it happened in one or two other games, and then it really showed against Michigan. When Michigan blew them out, I was not surprised last year at all when Michigan blew out Wisconsin, because Wisconsin was not that good. They were different, especially on defense. Coming into this year, I was like, Wisconsin, I don't know about their defense. That's my big question. We know they'll be able to run the ball okay. Didn't know they'd be able to run it this well with 4 new offensive linemen. They've blown holes in people, but not Northwestern. I was wondering about their defense. Could they rebuild that defense, or do they have a long-term problem the longer they get away from Peterson and the people that built that defense from a couple years ago? This year, the resounding answer is no problem. That defense is back, reloaded, healthy. I know they had some injuries last year. Got a bunch of no-name guys that were low-star recruits. They're doing some good stuff. That middle linebacker, Orr, told you about him, 6 feet, 224. At 6 feet, 224, littleish inside linebacker. but gets off blocks and defeats blocks and quickness. The guy was a no-star recruit, had offers from Wisconsin, Nevada, and North Texas, or he's a kid from Texas. But other guys that were no-star recruits, 92 defensive tackle, Henningsen, redshirt sophomore, all these guys are redshirts on their defense. This guy can two-gap you at 6'3", 287, and he's a quick coil athlete too. And he's from Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, no-star. Now, he can stunt and turn the corner. I got it right here. He runs the hoop. He can, when they run the stunt for a defensive tackle at 6'3", 287, he can two-gap you, or when he disengages, can run the hoop. No-star recruit. And again, but against double teams, he's just kind of, not as good as like Panashuk and Raekwon Williams in terms of taking on double teams, or like some of those great Iowa teams that can just take on double teams and stand firm. Henningsen is more an athletic guy. Loudermilk, redshirt junior, he's an athletic coil type of guy too. Very good at two-gapping and getting off, but against double teams. So, if it's one guy he's taking on, he can control and get off. But if it's two guys, double team, Northwestern got a little movement on him, these defensive linemen. I'll go over more of them when we do the pre-snap read at the end of the week. The pass rusher, Zach Bond, 6'3", 235, number 56, outside linebacker, but he plays like as one of the four people on the defensive line standing up. He's a pass rusher, 6'3", 235. The guy has 6 sacks this year, and he can change direction and accelerate. Outside linebacker. I'm looking at him, and if he plays on that line all the time, I'm like, well, why can't you just run right at that guy? If he's a defensive end at 6'3", 225 or 235, with all that quickness, yeah, he's got quickness. He's 235. He's a linebacker. But if he's one of your front four, you got to be able to use that against them and isolate him and run right at him, I would think. So I got to look at some more to see if anyone's tried to do that. That guy, Zach Bond, he's out of Brown Deer, Wisconsin. His offers were from South Dakota State and Wisconsin. And the kid he committed to the Badgers 2 weeks before signing day. Talking about a no-star guy from, where did I say, Brown Deer, Wisconsin? He's got 6 sacks. He's good. Wisconsin, when you see this, you're like, evaluation, man. They are evaluating on defense. And then they are player development. Good defense. And, I mean, you see just, same foot, same shoulder, just beating people with physicality. That's his name, Wild Goose. Sounds like a whiskey or something. Wild Goose comes in and makes plays on the nickel defense. Ducks under to beat blocks, sticks people. These guys just... I talked about that when Michigan State played Northwestern. The Northwestern had people on defense that don't waste any steps. It's like straight line, no false steps. They get there, they defeat people. That's what Wisconsin does. They're good. Michigan State's going to have a real hard time beating them. We'll get into that more in the week. That's no news there. Going to have a hard time beating them. I was talking about the Iowa game, watching the Iowa-Michigan game. I'm like, man, Iowa looked like garbage. I know they blew people out and rushed for 350 yards against Middle Tennessee State, but the running back had no juice. And Michigan just outnumbered in the box. I mentioned this on Underground Bunker right before the game, that Michigan was going to outnumber them in the box, take away the run game, and Ken Stanley's receivers get off of man-to-man. And they couldn't. And then pass protection was not good, obviously, 8 sacks. More importantly, Nate Stanley was a statue. They turned him into Flat Stanley. Those of you that have kids know what Flat Stanley is. Stanley, man, and then on defense, Iowa is not what they've been in the past in terms of taking on, they two-gap you and be so strong and sturdy. Iowa's not what they used to be there either. And number 32, the linebacker for Iowa, is not an Iowa middle linebacker. Their defensive line is not an Iowa defensive line. I don't care what they did to those teams they beat earlier. I watched the Iowa State game, and Iowa State was the better team. And I said after that game, and after watching a little bit of Penn State against Purdue, I said, Penn State will be a 13 or 14-point favorite against Iowa. I know it's strange when you go to Iowa. It's as long as it's not a night game, that's worth a few points. And I know my friend Rico Keaney that works for us talks about Kinnick Stadium being the house of hell, and it is. Good teams go there and play beneath themselves. I know that. But I thought Iowa would be a 13, 14-point underdog, but I said they should be a 16 to 17-point underdog. I think I just saw it's like a 3-point spread or something like that. I think Penn State's going to destroy them. I could be wrong. Anyway, let's go back to the YouTube here. All right, Desert Spartan, hello from beautiful and sunny Chandler, Arizona. It's good to have you, Desert Spartan. Rob South, we match up really well with Wisconsin. I expect a great game in Madison. Rob South being positive. We appreciate that. Jesse Adams, Rob South, I think it's fair to criticize this offense coaching. The coaching staff, the offense has been getting worse every year. I also think MSU does beat Wisconsin this weekend too. Wow. It's a lot there, Jesse. Coaching staff gets worse every year. Well, this year I think they're better than last year because this year they've got a healthy Brian Lewerke. You know what's interesting? You watch Northwestern and how anemic they were on offense against Michigan State and against Nebraska this weekend and against Wisconsin because they don't have a quarterback. They thought Hunter Johnson was going to be the guy that transferred from Clemson. Boy, he really peed the field at Stanford and then struggled against Michigan State. They brought in the backup. The other backup was hurt against Stanford, so the number 3 quarterback came in against Michigan State a little bit. Number 3 quarterback also played against Nebraska and Wisconsin. Basically, they don't have a quarterback. You're watching them against Wisconsin, 3rd and 8. Remember all those years when Northwestern would pick up 3rd and 7 against Michigan State, like easy? And you're like, man, they're just and Northwestern could put up some numbers against a lot of teams. But this year they can't. They couldn't do it against Michigan State. Couldn't do it against Nebraska, couldn't do it against Wisconsin, and now Northwestern's like 1-4 or something like that. Jesse, Northwestern has the same coaches. They got a different quarterback. When the players change, a lot of times the offense doesn't play as well. Man, I was watching on Big Ten, network, they show some old games, and they were showing, last week, 2014 Michigan State versus Ohio State. That game, and of course Ohio State with JT Barrett had a perfect game, and they beat Michigan State 48-28 or whatever it was. But Michigan State was hanging in it for a while. Michigan State was maybe even leading 14-0 or 14-7, and Connor Cook just dealing, and players making catches. Tony Lippett, Keith Mumphrey, NFL guys, Conklin, Jack Allen, NFL guys, Langford at tailback, NFL guy, and just everything they're doing is just working, and that's very conventional, but the balance was great. They'd throw it on 2nd down and 4 and do some good things, but it's the players. It's the same coach that couldn't crack 10 points last year, but the players. Now, how many coaches can take bad players and do good things with them? Now, that takes some special coaches. First thing is you have to be healthy. But, Jesse, I respectfully disagree with you about the offense getting worse every year. But you can criticize them. No question about it. They only scored 10 points. Stu Redmond, Stu in the OC. Is that Orange County? Stu Redmond, Stu in the OC. Is that Orange County, I'm guessing? What's up with Shakur Brown? I've heard you say it's an injury, but it's going on 6 weeks now. I don't know. And they could use him. John G says, hey, Rob South retracted a message. Jesse Adams, I agree they're playing better, but at the same time, we don't have the depth as we have had in the past, and we are not developing the offensive line. You're correct about that. Jesse Adams says that comes down to coaching and recruiting. That's all I'm saying. All right, now that's a fair point, and that's true. When you talk about the offense and as if recruiting is part of the coaching, you're exactly right about that. Offensive line, evaluation, player development, obviously has not been that great because a lot of the current redshirt sophomores and juniors have been surpassed by some of the younger guys. Offensive line, the starting unit is what it is these days, but great point. That also gets to the point about skill position players. We will go now to the mailbag questions at SpartanMag.com for a question that pertains to what you were just talking about, Jesse. Excuse me. And this is from Chicagoland. The guy's name is 428 Grove Street. That's what his name is on the Underground Bunker message board at SpartanMag.com. He posts, is Willekes a step slower after his injury this year? I'll get to the second part of his question in a second, which pertains to your point, Jesse. I'll take this part first. He says, is Willekes a step slower after his injury? last year? Is he a step slower this year? I don't think so. But if you look at the numbers, and he did not make a lot of noise against Ohio State, the numbers are not as good. Willekes this year has 4 sacks, 6.5 tackles for loss. Last year for the season, he had 8.5 sacks. So he's on target to have the same number of sacks. But his TFLs are down. Last year, 20 tackles for loss for the year. This year, only 6.5 so far. So is he slower? I've not noticed that. It's a good question. It's a possibility. I think it's also more likely that teams go into it scheming where's number 48, how they're going to take care of 48. And if you are double teaming him a little bit more, that leaves defensive tackles open. And you saw against Ohio State, Raekwon Williams, Panashuk, those guys were getting off single blocks. Even Zach Slade one time. Or was it the other Slade? Which Slade is it? Number 64, the defensive tackle. Anyway, Slade, number 64, one time when Michigan State was playing really well early in the game, beat the left guard. He either set the edge or bounced the play, but he beat a guy one-on-one. Raekwon Williams all night was beating people one-on-one. Well, why are those guys getting one-on-one blocks? Because the blocking scheme is a lot of times skewing to Keaney Willekes. I'll have to look at that again, and I'll have to go and watch the game a third time, and I'll just watch him and see what was going on there. But that's a good question. The second part of the question, which pertains to what Jesse was talking about, he says, what is it going to take to step up recruiting? He says, I've heard our recruiting budget is half of Ohio State's, but there has to be more to it than that. Even John L. Smith recruited better skill talent. Well, lately, you're probably right. Lately, Michigan State's skill talent recruiting has not been good. It was really good when they were getting those guys that I just mentioned a moment ago that played in 13, 14, and 15. But if you look at Michigan State's skill talent, just look at the names. At running back, Connor Hayward, Ladarius Jefferson, we know what they've become. They kind of hit their ceiling of potential. Elijah Collins looking pretty good. We'll have to wait and see with Brandon Wright, the big running back out of Euclid, Ohio. I loved his junior film. Senior film was good, but not as good as his junior film, I didn't think. Redshirting now. He traveled. He made the travel team to Columbus, did Brandon Wright, and D'Antonio was talking about that on Sunday in the teleconference, saying that Brandon Wright is like a second-string special teams guy. Also, I think there's some politics there, too. When you're going back to the state of Ohio, it behooves you to travel some Ohio kids, maybe, just to be on the sideline, because you see people close to home. It's good housekeeping in a lot of ways, and we've seen that a lot over the years. Excuse me. But other skilled people, they'd be better at wide receiver if they had Hunter Rison and Tristan Jackson. There's a little bit of a malcontent thing going on there, but I wrote about the wide receivers in the article that I wrote on Sunday morning, saying that and I talked about this in the VCast with Paul Konerdijk, that the wide receivers, in my opinion, just are not up to the Michigan State standard. When they were doing their things in 2013, 14, and 15, they had NFL receivers. And, of course, they would love to have NFL receivers. That's the aim. That's what they're trying to get to. But they don't have the Benny Fowlers, Keith Mumphrey, Tony Lippett types like they did back then. Even Keith Nickel, a former wide receiver, was a former quarterback, did some good things at wide receiver. And I talked about Darrell Stewart on the VCast. I'm not going to repeat all those things. He's trying his best. He's working hard, but he also has a lot of dropped passes. And he took a hard hit against Arnett in the second quarter with 4 minutes to go in the half. And I'm not sure he was ever the same the rest of the game. Dropped some passes later, one of which he had 2 consecutive drops, which stalled a drive. But just in terms of recruiting, let's look at it. Last year at wide receiver, Michigan State signed Trevon Morgan, Jace Bowen, Julian Barnett, Trey Mosley. Jace Bowen playing baseball. Trevon Morgan is a big dude, had a great senior season last year in Ohio. I've seen him in the hallways. He's the biggest wide receiver I've ever seen. Big guy. We'll have to wait and see what he turns into. He's got to stay healthy, but I think he's got ability. So that leaves you with Julian Barnett, Trey Mosley. Barnett's playing a little bit now. Barnett, let's see how many snaps he had. He had more snaps than ever. 15 snaps. It's the most he's had. Larice Nelson had 9 snaps. He's not a freshman, but I might make that point in a minute. Trey Mosley, he was here for spring practice. They keep making the point that he's going to be playing. He's close. We have not seen him yet. Jaden Reed, the transfer from Western Michigan, he's going to help next year. Cannot help now. That's who they signed this year. Barnett and Mosley have a chance to be pretty good. Jaden Reed should help. You're right. They need more help there. 2018, they're getting nothing out of that class right now in terms of wide receivers. In 18, they had Jalen Naylor, who's hurt. You'd have more if you had him. The whole thing might look better if you had him. But wide receiver, you had Julian Major, Javez Alexander. Julian Major came in from Pittsburgh. I wasn't wild about his film then, and I wasn't surprised that he only lasted a week before he wanted to leave. Then he came back, then he left again. Davion Williams, he was out of Belleville, right? He's at corner now. We talked about him earlier here in the podcast. But he was at corner now. He came in as a corner wide receiver. And that's happened with a few guys. Justin Lane, it happened with him. Julian Barnett is playing wide receiver. Justin Lane, of course, went to DB. So Barnett, Davion Williams, Justin Lane are three. Justin Lane are three big-time talents that could have gone either way. Two of the three ended up on defense. Now they've got Julian Barnett on offense, probably because of what we're talking about right here. They've been coming up dry at wide receiver. Go back another year, 2017. They signed Larice Nelson, who looked pretty good as a true freshman. Now he's kind of plateauing. He's not getting as much playing time now. He signed with Michigan State at the 11th hour. I mean, he got his scholarship offer the morning of signing day, and he had no other offers. Michigan State, I mean, he was going to be working at Walmart if he didn't get that offer from Michigan State. And, he was happy. He was thankful. He came up, made a splash, did some good things. Now he's kind of gone away from the playing group. I don't know what's going on there. But when they signed him, that tells you that Michigan State in 2017 was having trouble recruiting wide receivers because they were looking at others, and at the last minute they took Larice Nelson. Ended up a pretty good evaluation because he's a Big Ten level player. Haven't seen him much this year yet. But that year, Michigan State signed Emmanuel Flowers, but they signed Emmanuel Flowers as a corner. Tried wide receiver, now I think he's back on defense. Also signed C.J. Hayes. He's playing a little bit now. He always makes one or two plays, especially on third downs, doing some good things. But he dropped a pass, a big one, when Michigan State, early in the game, the third, which drive was it? It was in the first half. It was a drive killer. It was third down. Michigan State fumbled the first two drives of the game, and then had the drop pass. I can't remember when it was. Probably the third or fourth possession, maybe the fourth possession. Anyway, he dropped along the sideline. C.J. Hayes, he still has like one little drive killer, and it's not little when it's a drive killer. He still has one drive killer a game. He's turning in good plays. He's continuing drives with some really difficult, impressive third down catches. So I assume he can take it to the next level and become a guy that's not giving you those drive killers. Now, it wasn't like a drop right in his hands. It was an outcut, good coverage, real good ball. It would have been a difficult catch, not a great catch, but you got to make that catch. That's C.J. Hayes. So that year they recruited C.J. Hayes, Larice Nelson, Hunter Rison, and Cody White. They're getting something out of Cody White, but again, not consistent. And he does some good things. He made a big splash as a freshman. Last year was hurt, and it hurt the team when he was hurt. This year, you've been watching it. Cody White's been kind of up and down. And he had that fumble on the first drive. And that one, he caught it. They never showed a replay. It was never reviewed. As viewers, we never saw all angles of that thing. It had all the markings of being a question as to whether he had possession or not before he fumbled it. Didn't get reviewed, though. Just wondering, it's a big business. It's a big business. And that's a brand. That's a brand in this business. Just makes me wonder. Anything that's kind of doesn't get looked at. Anyway, and then the year before, Michigan State signed Tristan Jackson, who's doing some pretty good things at Syracuse this year, has 4 or 5 touchdown passes, is leading Syracuse in receptions. Now, he was a little bit of a malcontent. You don't want people to stay, if that's the case, whatever. Nothing against him. But he had some talent, didn't stay. Hunter Rison had some talent, didn't stay. And he's run into some other problems. Justin Lane in 2016, big timer, went pro early, defensive player. Cam Chambers, that's a different one. In 2016, signed Cam Chambers. Came in. That looked like a great wide receiver class. You had Justin Lane, who could go both ways, Cam Chambers, Donnie Corley, Tristan Jackson. Looked like a great wide receiver class. Corley was a good player. You all know what happened there. Tristan Jackson, good player. Malcontent, whatever. Was not happy that other people were getting playing time ahead of him in the bowl game. Gone. Justin Lane, great player. other position. Cam Chambers is a big head scratcher. Got on the field a little bit as a redshirt freshman. He's going to law school and all those things. He's traveling. He's on the travel team. Got a couple of snaps, I think, at Northwestern. I don't think he got any snaps in this game. He was there. I've not asked what the deal is with Cam Chambers, but those are that's the skill recruits. That's who they've been recruiting, and you can see the miss rate. They've missed on a lot of those guys, for whether it's attrition for off the field situation or just guys like Julian Major and Javez Alexander, or even now Larice Nelson and Cam Chambers, just guys not getting traction. And when you're seeing C.J. Hayes do some good things but leave some other plays on the field, and you see Cody White leave some plays on the field, it begs the remedy of, okay, next man up. Who's next? We're not seeing next man up get those chances. I'm not saying there's guys that are behind them that are capable. As a walk-on, I've always been intrigued with Jazz Watts. I thought Jazz Watts turned in a really good play in the Green-White game. Looked like a scholarship guy across the middle, accelerate through the catch. Looked pretty good. I don't know what the answer is, but your point is correct. Offensive coaching, if you include recruiting, you're right. It's not where it used to be, and that bears some more watching. We are about almost an hour in already. Let me go through some of these other questions. Let's see. Okay, Stu Redmond telling me it was 7-7 when Peoples-Jones had the touchdown. Yeah, okay. Cutie Driver 1. Did I read that correctly? I don't want to make any mistakes on a name like that. Says, thoughts on Michigan State going into the transfer portal for a quarterback, skill position talent to bring in more speed. You know, that's part of the game now, transfer portal. We all know Connor Hayward went into the transfer portal here 4 games into the season. There was a safety, doesn't pertain to your question, but there was a safety for West Virginia that went into the transfer portal. A lot of people think he's going to transfer to his old coach, Dana Holgerson at Houston. And that doesn't pertain to your question necessarily, but it's really changed the landscape on a lot of things. It's like the new free agency. Quarterbacks, Michigan State's going to look at Rocky Lombardi and Peyton Thorne, Theo Day. It's possible, if they're not feeling good about those guys, that could happen. I doubt they're going to be I doubt they'll be in the market for it. I don't think they want to go there. I think they want to go with Day or Lombardi or Thorne and see who wins that and go with it. That's an interesting one, though. When you look at some of the national championship contenders and the quarterbacks that have been changing places, Ohio State has one. Oklahoma has one. They had Jalen Hurts from Alabama. Ohio State gets Fields from Georgia. There's others. It's, the Eason kid went from Georgia to Washington. Now, Washington has had a disappointing season so far, but your point is well taken. Michigan State, a couple of years ago, was looked at a program that produced NFL quarterbacks as well as anybody. That's how Michigan State was able to get Brian Lewerke and Rocky Lombardi. So Michigan State had that going for them then. Is there still some pull when Michigan State tries to sell that? Yes, I'm sure there is, but not as much as there was just 2 or 3 years ago. When Michigan State had that pull, if the transfer portal had still been around at that time, they definitely would have been a strong candidate for those type of things. Also, Michigan State at that time was running more of a pro-style offense. Now, I know a lot of the NFL programs are starting to run more RPOs and things of that nature, but it's still huddle, get under center, reverse pivot, play action. There's a lot more of that in the NFL than there is in college. But Michigan State was running the old school stuff, not only that stuff. They did some spread concepts also. But not only did Michigan State produce NFL players, they ran more of an NFL-oriented system. That's how Brian Hoyer was able to stick. So those things made Michigan State attractive to quarterback recruits that wanted to be NFL quarterbacks. So if the portal had been around back then, they could have, I don't know what they could have gotten in on at that time. But you raise a good point. I don't know if they'll get in on quarterbacks this year. Let's wait and see what it looks like next year. But it's a question. They've got to. They need something to come along. I wonder if you can wait until after spring practice to get more of an idea of what you have, and then that could happen. I think it was after spring practice that Michigan State got the Jaden Reed kid from Western Michigan. So they've got him as a skill position player coming in. Wouldn't shock me if Michigan State looks in that direction a little bit. I think you have to. D'Antonio might drag his feet on those things a little bit because I think he wants to win with his people. You know how he is, loyal guy. But they went after Jaden Reed. They'll go after some others, I would imagine, if there is reciprocated interest. Let's see some other questions here. Comment on tight end drastic improvement, please. Seth Foreman. I think it's the system. I think and a lot of these throws to the tight ends against Arizona State, a lot of them were like delay routes, like snap the ball, delay, and then go over the middle. And against Ohio State, with Seibert, he would engage and block a little bit, and then let the guy go, and then go over the middle. They were delayed. You know, the RPO, I mean, you delay it and bring those linebackers up. It's the old play-action concept, but even more so now because you can elongate that read a little bit more. Tight end late release over the middle. And we had that at SpartanMag.com, the article in August, when Matt Dotson told us that he was excited because the tight ends had been targeted something like 15 times, 16 times in the 2 August scrimmages. At that time, information was really sparse about the offense, what it was going to look like, and things of that nature. But that was one clue that we had at SpartanMag.com when Dotson told us that the tight ends were getting used more. And I wrote an article that Dotson was going to have a breakthrough season. Dotson's been injured a little bit, had a couple drop passes. I got that one wrong. The breakthrough guy was Seibert. I think Dotson still could be that guy, but Seibert is viewed as being more reliable. Dotson is more athletic, has been hurt, but Seibert has really taken the ball and run with it, done a good job. It just comes down to that's where the read takes them. And Lewerke didn't throw to the tight ends a lot in the last couple of years. I don't think he trusted the tight ends. They dropped some passes. Sokol dropped some passes. Dotson dropped 1 or 2 passes. So I think in the old system, the tight end read may not have come up as early as it does now in a lot of plays. So they've had a chance to do it. And Gillison's starting to do some things too. So that's a big reason for that. Stu Redmond about C.J. Hayes. You're right, he does struggle to line up correctly. And he had a penalty, illegal procedure, lined up incorrectly in this game. And that did not cost them anything this time except it cost them 5 yards. I can't remember if they picked it up or not. But at least it didn't cause a big gainer to come back. Now later in the game, there was one. I think it was the tight end that time that didn't get lined up. Let's see, illegal procedure on C.J. Hayes. It's 1st and 10 at the 25. That was the first play of their third drive. So they had fumbled, and then the first play of the third drive, C.J. Hayes doesn't get lined up. But very next play, Lewerke gained 16 yards on a zone read keeper. So they ended up picking up that yardage anyway. But you're right, I mean, that's inexcusable. It's been a problem all year. Penalties before the ball is snapped, inexcusable. When is that stuff going to get fixed? Gosh, I don't know. And you know it's killing D'Antonio, and they've not been a team that's had a ton of that in the past. They've worked on getting it stamped out. All I can say is it's not getting fixed. So they got to figure that out. If not, they're going to lose 3 more, at least. Michigan State needs to find another Napoleon Outlaw, says Desert Spartan. Now, Napoleon Outlaw, we just talked a minute ago about wide receivers, when they drop a pass or don't line up correctly, the next thought is, okay, who's the next guy behind him? Who deserves a chance to get that guy off the field so someone else can be sharper with it? Well, Napoleon Outlaw, in 1994, Michigan State was playing Kansas when Glenn Mason was head coach at Spartan Stadium. That, by the way, was the first time Mark D'Antonio had ever set foot at Spartan Stadium. And he tells the story now that it really made an impression on him, that it just looked like Big Ten, big time, campus, college. He thought it was beautiful. And when the next year when the job came open, now this part, I've got to look into this. That's what D'Antonio's told us right there. This next part is stuff I've heard. Next year, 95, job gets open. Nick Saban's the new coach. And I've heard that D'Antonio sought that job and sold himself to Saban. I've never asked D'Antonio about that. I'll have to do that sometime. I may have scooped myself on that a little bit. I'll turn that one down for now. Anyway, 94, they're playing Kansas. And at that time, let me get this straight. At that time, Muhsin Muhammad, I think, was starting. Yes. Early in the game, Tony Banks, Muhsin Muhammad, drop pass. You know, Perlis didn't love throwing the ball. He really hated drop passes. Muhsin came out, Napoleon Outlaw went in, and Napoleon Outlaw started the rest of the year. Or was that 1993? That was 93, not 94. That was 1993. In 94, they went to Kansas. They played at Kansas. And that same weekend was the weekend that the Rolling Stones used Spartan Stadium in 94, if I'm right. But 93, Muhsin Muhammad, drop pass, out. Napoleon Outlaw started the rest of the year. And then Muhsin ran into some problems off the field. But anyway, Desert Spartan, Michigan State needs to find another Napoleon Outlaw. Napoleon Outlaw had one of the all-time great names, had a decent start to his career, but then he ended up being on the bench when Saban came to town, 95, 96. Muhsin came back up. Nigeria Carter was still around. Derek Mason, wide receivers. That's what I'm talking about. Where's Derek Mason and Muhsin Muhammad types? Michigan State over the years has been a wide receiver U of sorts. Right now, you know, Darrell Stewart's doing what he can. He's dropping some passes, leading the Big Ten in receiving yards or close to it. Like I've said before, he's a good number 3 receiver. He's doing all he can. But Michigan State does not have like that outside receiver at 6'2" that can just run a deep post and just blow the top off a defense. Cody White could have been that guy maybe, but he's kind of leveled off. They're doing what they can, but they need to do more if they want to go 9-3. And is it in them? I'm not sure. Seth Foreman, are you stating that T-shirt schools get the calls from the Zebras? In the Pac-12, it's been well written. Who was the dude's name? Something Austin or something like that. He was the Pac-12 administrative executive of the conference. And last year, USC was playing Washington State. And there was a targeting penalty against a USC player. And it's known as a fact that when they were reviewing the targeting, the replay officials got a call from this guy, a Pac-12 executive. And this part of shade is foggy, but if you just Google it and look it up. I don't know if he suggested that it wasn't targeting or what, but whatever it was, they overturned it and they did not call targeting on the USC player. And the Washington State people are like, are you kidding me? And that guy's no longer affiliated with Pac-12, but that was uncovered. My point is, if it happens in the Pac-12, does it happen elsewhere? I don't know. Is it in the back of anyone's minds? I don't know. Has the Big Ten been without players in the college football playoff the last couple of years? Yes. Business being business, I mean, Ohio State was the better team. They were going to win. They deserve it, and they're really good. But business being business, is the Big Ten better off if Michigan State stages another upset of Ohio State? Is that really good for Big Ten business? No, it's not. Does that have an impact consciously, subconsciously with people like that who exist in other conferences? I don't know. I'm just asking questions, but sometimes I wonder. I mean, did you think that C.J. Hayes pass, they could have looked at it to see if he had possession or not? If it had been Ohio State, would they have looked at it? And then the touchdown on the 60-yarder. You talk about inches. I mean, you looked at it. Should that have been a touchback out of the end zone or into the end zone? Gosh, it looked like it to me. And I know they didn't really have a camera angle over the goal line, and they looked at it. I'm sure they looked at it, and there was nothing obvious that says they should have overturned it. So they had no choice. They took a long look at that. So, but that was inches. Now I know a lot of you people are saying, well, if it had been a fumble, Kalen Gervin did not jump on the ball in the end zone to get it. And D'Antonio mentioned that in the teleconference also, that Gervin's got to jump on the ball there. I mean, it's a game. It's a ball. It's the end zone. Why would you not cover it, right? Now, I know the whistles were blowing, so if the whistles are blowing, there's no reason to. I can see why he didn't. But you could say, well, if they'd called it a fumble, Ohio State still recovered it. Actually, they did, but if you look at it again, Benjamin, the receiver, as he was being hit, his hand touched the ground as he was still touching the ball. So that would have it would have been dead before it rolled into the end zone. It would have been a touchback. Now that's 60 yards, trick play, blown coverage. All right, so we'll get into the inches now. D'Antonio, when they were winning games and winning championships in 2013, 14, 15, he talked about the inches, and there's this much difference between winning and losing. These are the inches. On that play, trick play, Ohio State makes a trick play work. Michigan State never ran a trick play. Michigan State's not really been a trick play team this year. Do they have some in the hopper? They'll show it sometime, I would imagine so. But Michigan State, to that point, Ohio State to that point had run 16 plays and had only 44 yards of total offense. 16 plays. You're getting into the second quarter, and at that point, Ohio State was averaging 2.7 yards per play. This is one of the best offenses in college football, and Michigan State playing well. And then that play happens. D'Antonio was mad that Kalen Gervin did not make the tackle at 20-yard. Kalen Gervin did not make the tackle at the 20-yard line. He just kind of got flat-footed and became a road pylon, and he went around him. Josiah Scott showing some speed in this game that I didn't know he had. Came around, made the hit. If they call that a touchback, Michigan State's ball at the 20, that would have been a big play in the game, obviously, 7 points. Especially at that point, Ohio State had run 16 plays, hadn't gotten anything. They break off one play, and if they hadn't gotten the touchdown on that, and I mean, that was inches. And I didn't ask D'Antonio what the coach's film looked like, whether they got a good look at it or not. And I was going to ask him about it, but I didn't. I asked some other questions. I blew some other time on other questions. But the inches, they scored 27 points in the first half. If that one goes the other way, maybe it's, instead of 27 at halftime, it's 20. Think about this one. Ohio State drives, kicks a field goal at the end of the half. Michigan State, that's when Darrell Stewart dropped those passes. Michigan State had the ball, 2 minutes to go in the half. They're trailing 24-10. Darrell Stewart, drop pass. Now that was the drive after that he took that big hit from Arnett. I'm not sure he's quite right. Bless his heart, he's doing his best, took a hit, dropped those 2 passes. If he catches those passes, Michigan State moves on. Maybe Michigan State scores. What we do know is Michigan State would not have punted the ball back to Ohio State with time to come back and kick a field goal. Even on that drive, Ohio State threw a deep pass. David Dowell dropped an interception. I mean, it wasn't an easy interception. He's kind of tracking it and had to come back and trying to catch it like a punt. Dropped it. It was a semi-difficult catch, but he was all by himself. Those are the plays you have to have if you want to pull this upset. If you catch those balls, Darrell Stewart, or David Dowell, if you catch that, then Ohio State doesn't get that last field goal. Instead of 24-10 at halftime, instead of 27-10, it's 24-10 inches. And if that touchback gets overturned, it's 17-10. I know if candies and nuts and all this crap, 17-10. And if Lewerke doesn't overthrow CJ or Cody White on that one, it's 17-14. You're down, you're still going to lose, maybe. Whole different vibe, though. As it was, it's 27-10 coming out in the second half. Michigan State gets the ball, drives down. They don't get the pass interference inside the 5-yard line. I understand the thinking on that. The safety is going out to the flat to get the running back and collides with a wide receiver inadvertently. By the letter of the law, that might have not been pass interference for that reason. But D'Antonio was upset about it. State misses the field goal. You call pass interference there? If you're not Michigan State, I don't know. But you saw Ryan Day's reaction when he missed the field goal. He was celebrating. He was happy. And he said in the post-game interview that opening drive was really important. Michigan State came down, moving the ball. Michigan State was moving the ball far better than anybody Ohio State had played all year. And although Michigan State was down 17 points, although Ohio State was up 17 points, Ohio State was not comfortable for good reason, especially the coaches and Ryan Day. They were not comfortable. Michigan State coming down, could have scored a touchdown there, cut it to 10 points. Field goal would have cut it to 14. I understand the decision to do that, but Ryan Day's reaction was genuine and heartfelt, and he was excited that they stopped him and missed the field goal because he thought Michigan State was still in it, because he knew the difficulty Ohio State was having moving the ball, regardless of 280 yards of offense in the second quarter. They had those 3 long drives. Well, 120 yards came on those 2 plays, and they deserved it. They got a trick play, and it scored. And then the 67-yarder with Dobbins on that one, Joe Bacci playing a good game, doing his thing. On that one play, it's just an inside zone. They ran it 20 times. On that one, he's got to get in front of the center and get to his gap. Instead, the center gets out on him. He's a little bit late, and he's trying to get there, and he gets up, so he kind of gets penciled a little bit. He just has to get to his gap, and that's where he ran through, that daylight right there. And the safety, Herb Street and those guys were talking about the safety, Xavier Henderson, taking a false step, and he did, but he took a false step because the running quarterback is carrying out the zone read fake. So the quarterback goes without the ball, but the safety has to honor that, and that's why he's out of position, and it goes back this way. Still, Keaney Allen at the 20-yard mark's got to get a tackle there. D'Antoni was preaching that last night. Again, if you want to play a perfect game and beat Ohio State, you got to get a tackle there. You can't become a pylon, miss a tackle. If you get a tackle there at the 20-yard line, the score is 10-7. Michigan State's red zone defense was pretty good in this game. They forced a field goal the first time around, field goal the second time around, and then in the third quarter, Justin Fields had that real tough, rugged 3rd and goal quarterback sneak. Michigan State bowed up, played good defense at the end, barely got in, still hitting hard. It was not easy to score against Michigan State in the red zone. So if Keaney Allen can make a tackle at the 20-yard line on that trick play, like D'Antonio says, line them up, make them snap it again instead to get a touchdown. And then on the Dobbins one, 67 yards, going for the strip at the 20-yard line. Josiah Scott showing speed I've never seen him have. Runs him down, going for the strip. D'Antonio's like, no, you got to get the tackle there. Try to strip on your way down, but get a tackle him at the 20-yard line, 19-yard line, make them snap it again. Maybe red zone defense comes through there. Instead, they get the 7. Instead, on the other one, they get the 7. And even Joe Bacci, there was the one when it was, I think it was 17-7, 17-10. Michigan State had cut it to 17-10. When Lewerke missed him, they drive back down, complete a pass to the tight end. Joe Bacci at the 7-yard line looked to me like was going for the strip. Didn't get it. Joe Bacci's a great tackler. Didn't go for the tackle, the wrap. Went for the strip, gets loose, touchdown. D'Antonio wants a tackle there, line up at the 7-yard line, make him snap it again. 3 times, 21 points. They finished too easily on those. And I know the yardage numbers ended up being a blowout, but I texted Big Mooby in the third quarter when it was 34-10. I'm like, do you realize how close this game is to being a 21-20 football game? And he was like, absolutely. But that's the way football is. 34-10. In actuality, the score is not 34. It's 34-10, but it's really, it's like 4.5 to 1.5 because you score 4.5 times and the other team scores 1.5 times. If you look at it in a hockey game, 4-1, 4-2, 5-2. Yeah, it's a comfortable win, but 34-10 seems like a big blowout. You saw it. It wasn't a big blowout. It turned out that way because Michigan State still had too many loose ends, didn't finish in the red zone, and you know all the rest of the drill. What I just got into with the inches also pertains to a question that somebody had about tackling. Let me see if I can find that question. All right, GR03 from SpartanMag.com at the Underground Bunker. We're going to wrap it up here in a second. He says, is the tackling technique to cause turnovers contributing to missed tackles? He asks. He's from Grand Rapids. And the answer is yes. I just went over those. The 60-yarder, Josiah Scott at the 20. I'm sorry, the 67-yarder, Josiah Scott at the 20, went for the ball, gave up a touchdown. Joe Bacci at the 7-yard line went for the ball, gave up a touchdown. You're right, and Michigan State is emphasizing that, trying to get turnovers. They go over it every day. They really emphasized turnovers in this game. They really wanted a sack, strip, fumble to turn the tide. And did that cause them to get away from basic tackling technique? Because they've been a great tackling team for years. That's what they do. And in this game, I've never seen Michigan State, a D'Antonio team, do that once, let alone twice, and both on scoring plays. You're exactly right. It did have an impact on the tackling, which had an impact on the scoreboard, had an impact on the score, getting away when it maybe didn't necessarily need to. Let's go through these questions real quick before we move on, before we're done for the day. Let's see, we've got a lot of good questions here. I appreciate it. I got to rewind here to see what's on here. Stu Redmond, he's liking the pumpkin. Yeah. It's autumn. Oktoberfest. Tom Riggs, Desert Green, Scottsdale, Arizona, IBL. What is this? IBL played well enough Saturday to help Michigan State win, but what? Against almost any team not named Ohio State or Alabama. He keeps that up, and we have a chance to win any game on the schedule. Agree. IBL played well enough Saturday. Oh, Lewerke? Yeah, he played well enough. Made some really good passes. Missed the big one down there in the red zone. He made some difficult passes. Some of those third down passes were big time. And, did some things with his feet. Also, one of the biggest plays was that 35-yarder by Fields. And I've got an interesting point on that one. Key play. Michigan State had just scored. Darryl Stewart, a real gutty catch. Cuts it to 10-7. At this point, Michigan State's down 10-7. But if it's a boxing match, Michigan State's winning this game. They've won more snaps, won more plays. They look good. Upset alert is on. Ohio State gets it back. 3rd and 5 at their own 30-yard line. And Fields, it's 3rd and 5. Key play. He scrambles for 35 yards. Back to pass, 5-man rush. When they used to play against Denard Robinson at Michigan, Narduzzi talked about putting a wall around him. Put pressure on the quarterback, but don't let him get out. The wall broke down. He got out. Gain of 35. They go down and score. On that play, Mike Panasiuk was in the game. I'm like, man, Panasiuk, he doesn't usually play in a 3rd and 5 type of situation. And it was Panasiuk who kind of tried to get out of his gap, tried to make a play. Didn't, and it was his part. And he's a great player and had a great game. But it was his part of the wall that broke down. Now here's the key. D'Antonio mentioned this on Sunday in the teleconference, and he mentioned this point. He didn't mention the specific play, but as I look back at it, that's the play he's talking about. Ohio State, to their credit, very smart. 2nd down and 8, whatever, they gained 3 yards. Now it's 35. They hurry up to the line and they run tempo. Back to pass, gets out, 35 yards, tempo. On one hand, you're enabling, you're fatiguing the defense a little bit. Firstly. Secondly, because they went tempo, Michigan State was unable to put their nickel defense on the field. They had to stay with their regular personnel, including Mike Panasiuk, who's usually not in there in a 3rd down pass rush situation. D'Antonio said they did a good job tempoing at different times. They're always no huddle, but sometimes they're no huddle, methodical. Sometimes Ohio State, are no huddle fast. 3rd down, they went no huddle fast to prevent Michigan State from putting their nickel defense on. Smart move by them. I didn't really notice it in real time, but on that play, Panasiuk was in there, the regular 5-man rush. Wall breaks down, 35 yards, scramble. And like D'Antonio said, there were probably 10 times in that game where he drops back to pass, and they've got him covered, and the play is stopped. But because he has legs, he has the chalk last. He gets out, elongates the play, might throw it, might keep it, move the chains, was a complete headache because he had that extra dimension. And a lot of the great quarterbacks do. Nate Stanley for Iowa did not have that dimension. And when Michigan had things covered, play was over. He was done. He's a statue. Against Ohio State, you have things covered, play's not over. Justin Fields, to his credit, made a huge difference on that play. Gets out, 99-yard or a 35-yard run. Joe Bacci on that play also misjudged the angle. Easy for me to say, but maybe underestimated the speed of that quarterback. Turns the quarter, 35 yards. Then they stayed tempo. Ohio State, to their credit, stayed tempo through a bubble. Second time they tried a bubble screen. Of course, Michigan State had a lot of trouble against the bubble screen against Indiana. Through the bubble screen, Michigan State, now a little tired, gets loose for 10 yards. So now they're rolling. That's when Michigan State called a defensive timeout, which I thought was really smart. I think a lot of teams on defense should call more defensive timeouts in the first half. You're not saving your timeouts for an end game situation. Spend your timeout. I thought that was a smart, wise use of a timeout. Problem is they came back out, and at some point, I don't remember what down it was, but that was the play to the tight end. Joe Bacci goes for the strip, touchdown, 17-7. But rewind it back, 3rd and 5. They got it covered. He gets out. Man, if they keep that wall around him like they did earlier in the game, they get a sack there and get the ball back 10-7. In time, I think Ohio State probably would have proved themselves to be the better team. And they were the better team because Michigan State did things like that, like going for a strip at the 7-yard line or not keeping the fence around him. But that game was there for Michigan State to take it into the third quarter or longer and for things to get tense and tight in the horseshoe again. But Michigan State, not good enough to do it. Maybe physically close to being good enough to do it, even though their offensive line against the Ohio State defensive line is kind of a mismatch. And Michigan State, for 3 quarters, did a good job of just kind of hamming and egging it, an Izzo term, to get away from the Chase Klein, the daunting specter of Chase Young, number 2, the defensive end. He made an impact later in the game, but Michigan State chipped him with a running back or sprinted out away from him enough so that he didn't wreck the whole operation early in the game. He certainly helped wreck the fourth quarter, though. Let me go through these real quick. Desert Spartan, at the beginning of the season, many people were saying the ceiling for this team would be 10 wins. That seems unlikely at this point. So what is the ceiling now? 8 wins, 9 wins, 7 wins. I think the ceiling is 9 wins for reasons we mentioned earlier. That'd be a really good season if they can take 2 out of 3 from Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan, and win the rest. It's going to be real hard to do. That's the ceiling. I don't know if they'll get there. Tom Coyle would like to hear more about your comments on our wide receivers being MAC type. Well, read the article I wrote on Sunday morning. That's what they are as of now. I mean, there's potential for C.J. Hayes to become more consistent. There's potential for Cody White to become more consistent. But right now they're not. And I'd like to say they're doing their best. I'm sure they are. They're just not up to the Michigan State standard. If you had Michigan State, the normal Michigan State type of wide receivers, how much better would Brian Lewerke look? Probably quite a bit better. I mean, he looked when he threw that incompletion to C.J. Hayes, that 3rd down, like on the 3rd or 4th possession, after Cody White had fumbled one, and then C.J. Hayes. I mean, Lewerke might have been the best throw he threw all night. He threw 3 really great throws. The other 2 over number 5 Browning on those 3rd downs that Herbstreit was talking about. Great passes. This might have been one of his best 3, along with those other 2, right to where only C.J. Hayes could catch it, and it just goes through his hands. And then as Lewerke's coming off the field, he's looking up at the scoreboard to watch the replay to see how catchable it was. What can he do? I mean, if that's Lippett or any number of receivers they've had in recent years, Michigan State still has the ball. And Lewerke's got more yards, and the yardage is, the stats are different. Anyway, Doors fan 91, you're tardy again. I know you've been here a while. I'm just now getting to it. Let's wrap this up. Chewins and Arcuri injuries are frustrating. I agree. Rob South, Cody White seems to have trouble getting separation. What is going on? Yeah, when he was jammed by Arnett early in the game, when Arnett's a big physical corner, and you're not seeing Cody White, who's a big guy in his own right, you're just not seeing him defeat hands and just get by people. Speaking of which, I'm not here to tell Joe Bacci how to play linebacker, but I know how his buddy Riley Bulla would have taken that on when that center's coming out at him. Riley would have, and I don't know, Joe Bacci, he was playing a little bit hurt last year. That was the rumor. Last week, that was the rumor. So I know he's giving it all, and it's so important to him as an Ohio kid there and everything. But Riley would have taken on that. I'm talking about the 67-yarder that Dobbins had when Bacci did not get to the B gap on the other side of the center. The center came out and reached him. Riley would have just ripped through there to get there, but Bacci was a little bit late and got penciled up a little bit. I'm seeing a lot of that with other guys too, that they're not ripping through to defeat blocks. And that occurred to me when I was watching Wisconsin, because they do it really well, a lot of guys for Wisconsin. Brian Schultz, Will the MSU offense continue to shoot itself in the foot against Wisconsin and Penn State? They better not. They better not, because those teams are going to put some points up, and they better not. I have no way of predicting that, but when you're 6 games in and they're still doing it, that's what they are. And when you try to predict if you're trying to time the market on when something's going to change, you'll still be here in week 9 and 10 waiting for it to happen. Once it's week 6, that's what they are. And in order to play a cleaner game, especially on offense, I need to see it to believe it. Nick Harrington, with the new 1-year contract for the offensive staff, do you think Mark will clean house on that side of the ball this offseason? Obviously, there's still time to make improvement, but haven't seen enough. I think there's been improvement. Not on the scoreboard, and that's where it's most important. But, they moved the ball. I mean, if the kicker makes field goals, they beat Arizona State. If you're Brad Salem and you've got the little bunch set, gets man-to-man, and CJ and Cody White is open over there, and your quarterback overthrows him. I mean, your coordinator, you've schemed up a touchdown. And Lewerke, who's good, did he rush it because he had time there? Could he have waited a little bit longer for a better angle? I don't know. The third down, the dropped passes. How many more? I mean, there were 2 first downs that they lost on dropped passes. I mean, the coach is coaching that up, schemes it up, calls the play. It's open. They drop the pass. That's not the coach's fault. Now, getting back to Jesse's point, it's the coach's combined fault for recruiting these players and player development. That's true. But that part of it, I'm not as militant about saying that the offensive coaches, I think they've changed it, and I think they're looking better, but 10 points obviously is not enough. Let me say also that defense for Ohio State is dynamite, and they move the ball better than anyone else has, and Ohio State's going to play a lot of games against people that won't move the ball as well as Michigan State did. I know that, and 50 cents will get me one of these, a cup of coffee. It's not coffee, it's water. Jesse Adams, Jesse from Mount Pleasant, thanks for chiming in where you're from. We need to hear that. Wouldn't you agree Michigan State's defense is going to have to let Wisconsin's quarterback try to beat them? And Wisconsin really that good, or is it the teams they played? We already went over that. If you chime back in and listen to the beginning, I talked about Wisconsin a little bit. They're good, but their teams that they've played are not good. South Florida was their one non-conference game. They're scheduling more like the Barry Alvarez days. But their defense, yeah, you make Cone their quarterback. You make him beat you. He did not play well against Northwestern. He's not that good. Running game is good. Offensive line is good. They can be had. A good defense can stuff them. Does Michigan State have enough vinegar and whatever else to play hard another week for 4 quarters? It's going to be hard to do. Got to do it. I mean, those guys, Panashuk took a beating. Raekwon Williams, I think he's still doing pretty well. He'll be okay. But sometimes when you're hammering the nail, it gets a little bit dull after a while. It's a tough time for Michigan State to be getting Wisconsin, and it's a tough place to play them at this time. The great 1999 Michigan State team that finished in the top 10 beat Florida in the Citrus Bowl. They lost to Purdue in a very emotional game with Drew Brees. Physical in some ways with the way Purdue would cut block, to their credit, very effectively. The very next week, Michigan State went on the road to Wisconsin and lost 55-14 or something like that. Thornhill was hurt. Some other guys were hurt. They just couldn't stand up to the pounding. Ron Dane was his Heisman year. Some other week of the year, Michigan State would have offered more resistance. But playing there at that time, I would worry about Michigan State running into another situation like that this week. And then we will go through the wreckage again next week and see where they are. Tom Riggs, Desert Green, most Mark D'Antoni teams don't beat themselves, but self-inflicted wounds continue. Does that get fixed or not? I just talked about that a minute ago. I don't know the answer to that. But you're right, they need to. And it's not that when they've been good and gotten the inches, these are the things that they didn't do. They played more like Arizona State. Just kind of eke it out, don't make mistakes, play defense, steal it at the end. Anyway, Doors Fan 91, tackling seems to be regressing. I would agree with that. Ghosty Boy says, I love MSU. I wish they had stopped dropping passes because I think they have a ton of talent at wide receiver. It's an optimistic viewpoint. With Stewart, 2 or 3 of those drops, again, were after he took that big hard hit from Arnett, and that was a hard hit. And Stewart, hey, I'll never question his heart, man. The guy's got a heart. He's given everything he's got, and he's had a really good college career, and he's doing well. He has dropped some passes. Doors fan 91, Treadwell is the new wide receiver coach, Ghost. Yeah, good points, says Ghosty Boy. Let's see. Old Tuck being funny again. We could use another running back like Tyrone Crenshaw. Tyrone Crenshaw to Los Angeles. Los Angeles Player of the Year. Came in as a big-time tailback back when Perlis would get big-time tailbacks, but Crenshaw never amounted to anything. As you know, Old Tuck, he was around for a year or 2. That's the way all tailbacks were back then. They would get 7 of them, or 5 or 6 of them, and guys like Hickey Thompson would not make it. A little brighter this time. Sorry about that. All right, MJ. Hey, Comp, for next year, what do you think about quarterback number 10 during practice? I always noticed him. He has a great touch and can sling it. I guess you're talking about Thorne? I haven't seen enough of him. Batman Holman is a good one. It says Desert Spartan. I could talk more about these, but usually when my light goes out, we cut it off. Do you see any freshmen developing into a number 1 receiver in the future? Yeah, I'd say Barnett could be that. Seth Foreman, other wide receiver via transfer portal. I don't know. Jaden Reed's coming in. That'll be a good one. I think he'll make a difference. We already talked about tight end drastic improvement. C.J. Hayes. Is that all of them? James Bradley, Mill Coleman. I get nervous every time the ball is thrown to Cody White, Rick Nash says. He just isn't reliable. I can't argue with that. Damon Manson was the best in the opinion of Doors fan. Damon Manson, he had that big block punt against Indiana in 1993, right? He was from Florida, safety. I think he was number 18, if I'm not mistaken. Seth Foreman, perhaps the best name in history. Oh, Napoleon Outlaw, yeah. Peyton Thorne, I've not seen a lot of them, but I don't know what to say about him yet. I think you hear good things, but we heard good things about Rocky Lombardi too. And I think Lombardi's improved a little bit, but that's going to be a competition, and it's going to be hard to choose the right one. We'll get into that some other day. Nick Harrington, thanks for all the good stuff. As usual, Jim, by the way, I know you live where you are from Shout Out. So I'm originally from Battle Creek, but currently stationed at Fort Drum, New York. I don't know if I read that correctly, but you're welcome. Oh, I see. I know you like where you are from. I do like where I'm from. I don't understand that. We're going to wrap it up. Thanks, Rob. Great show. Glad you guys were all here. That light, I got to figure out. I guess the light gets a little impatient and goes out on me. But I appreciate everybody coming in, chiming in, and providing some feedback and some really good commentary, some good comments. And hope you guys tell your friends about Spartan Mag Live and SpartanMag.com, and tell your enemies too, because we want them to be part of it also. Haha, where you are from about out. Anyway, I still don't understand it. But anyway, we're going to wrap it up. I got some writing I need to do. Hope everybody's doing great. It's going to be a tough game at Wisconsin. We'll have the pre-snap read later in the week. I mean, it's going to be a really tough challenge. It'll take a really good team to go and beat the Badgers in Wisconsin. Michigan State's not been a really good team yet. They have potential to be a really good team on a given day. Need to have it happen right now. No more drop passes. No more illegal procedures before the snap. Need to get your gap and tackle. Michigan State gets to the gap and tackles a lot. But the one time you don't, it's 70 yards the other way when you're going against Dobbins or you're going against Taylor. Make that quarterback beat you. Don't beat yourself. They'll be in it. So we'll check it out. Come back next Monday, Spartan Mag Live. Jim Comparoni. Check out SpartanMag.com. Appreciate everybody chiming in from East Lansing, Michigan. See you next time.